This is an uncensored podcast about sex, sexuality, gender, and body stuff. Listener discretion is advised. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the person or persons sharing them. Some names have been changed to protect the anonymity of its participants. Hello, my friends. This is I, Drew Michael, and this is Make Sex With Me, a podcast that sometimes talks about some serious shit. And that's this week. So I'm not going to do a lot of joking, but I'm going to do a lot of real shit. So if you're like, ooh, I'm in this for the comedy, you might skip this one. This episode deals with violent crime. So trigger warning, deals with murder, sex crimes against mostly gay men. And not all gay men, but a lot of gay men. A lot of instances where the men are gay. I am recording this super, super late because I have been super, super busy, and I promised I would put out an episode this week that wasn't a quickie-sode. So I actually have done a good amount of research for this episode. This is going to be the first of hopefully many episodes where I actually do some research on a topic. And by research, I mean I've looked up articles online. So, but I have several sources that I have used in order to make this happen. All right, so it's also late trying to get this shit out while it's still Thursday. So, as per usual, guys, rate, review, subscribe. 5-star review, please. That would be very helpful. If you'd like to, you can email us at makesexwithmepodcast@gmail.com. We actually do have a write-in today, which is huge. Thank you so much. We'll get to that towards the end of the episode. But let's just jump into it because we have a lot to talk about. So I just wanted to explain how I started my day today. I have been planning this episode for a couple weeks now and just trying to figure out how to make it happen in the very little amount of time that I've had to plan episodes in. But anyway, I was having a terrible dream. I woke up early this morning. My parents are out of town. I let my dogs outside, and then I brought them back in, and I said, okay, dogs, I'm going to bed for another couple of hours because I stayed up too late last night. And then we'll go out together when I wake up. But anyway, napping is like a terrible idea for me. And apparently the nap that I received this morning between 8 and 10 a.m. was full of violent dreams. I basically had the longest running dream where I was just watching a ton of different men getting shot in different scenarios, and different, one man was at his wedding, another man was just in the bathtub, another man was out to dinner, and it was just this thing where I kept seeing people doing their thing, and then they would be shot unexpectedly, and then sometimes they would know it was coming and they'd freak out and then they'd get shot. There were exploding heads. It was just what the fuck is this dream? And it was the second dream in the last, I don't know, month, I guess, where I just felt like really, really bad about, I just felt bad. And I felt like I was stuck in feeling bad. And I was just like, I'm not this unhappy when I'm awake ever right now, like lately. But for some reason, sometimes I go to bed and I have these weird, depressing dreams. And it feels like you're just stuck in depression that you can't get out of. And it's just terrible. And you wake up and you just feel horrible. So that's literally what happened. And I could say that it's probably motivated by stress. I mean, I just got done with our comedy show. That was like a big thing. There's a lot of rapid change happening right now in my life and my work. And a lot of people are, like I said, my parents are out of town. They just flew yesterday to Las Vegas, and tomorrow they fly to Hawaii. And my niece just flew away. I have another friends that are traveling this weekend. It seems like everyone's left me all alone with my dogs, which is nice, and I like being alone, but it's just like a lot of change, a lot of rapid change. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I guess at work, I had to call 911 because a kid fell and like dislocated his knee, and he was screaming and yelling, fuck, fuck, fuck. And then they came and they gave him like drugs and they took him away. And it's like not something you want to do. You don't want to call 911 very often. Like I wasn't excited about that. Just all these like kind of in your face traumatic things. And then of course, while all of my seemingly traumatic things that are nothing, they pale in comparison to what's going on in Gaza right now. I mean, there's literally college students all over the world protesting and getting hauled off to jail by cops and shit. The apartheid shit going on with the Israeli government right now. I mean, like literal war crimes being carried out by the Israeli government. And it's something that our government is supporting and has always supported. And it's just bullshit. And it's like, I don't know. I don't even understand how we're supposed to like continue to do our shit, our normal shit, when that kind of shit's going on. I mean, that's not even the only bad thing happening in the world. I mean, there's still a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. Am I right? And there's still like genocides in places. There's still terrible things happening in countries, and there's still people who need to be granted asylum in other countries, and there's countries accepting them and then other countries turning people away, and like people being turned away while trying to like seek asylum and then having to go back and be like slaughtered because other countries won't take them in. It's just like there's all this shit happening, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And I mean, I'm so grateful. I thought several times today while walking my dogs how fortunate I was just to like walk around my neighborhood with my dogs, and we're all healthy and the weather's nice and my neighborhood's beautiful and my house is beautiful and there's no like intense violence right outside my door. Like it shouldn't be like a privilege to not have to be in a war zone, but it feels like it. So maybe a lighter thing I can talk about that also might have contributed to my bad dream was that I was watching the show Dead Boy Detectives last night, which is an adorable show, but there are exploding heads and there is some gore, but it's actually really funny and cute. And there's like that slow burn of like the two lead characters like are gonna fall in love. We all know it's gonna happen eventually, but they just keep drawing it out. I mean, we just fucking love that shit. And they're so cute. They're like so twinky and cute, and they're dead, so they're always gonna look like that. Ugh, fucking love it. Anyway, I was watching that show last night. You guys should all watch it. It's definitely a different kind of show. It's not something that I've ever seen before. I'm very impressed with it. And the premise of the show is like two dead boys, right? They both died. Although they keep stressing really hard in the show that all the main characters are supposed to be like high school aged, although none of them go to school. Well, two of them are dead, but the other two just like don't go to school. But none of these people look like high schoolers. They all look like they're in their like early 30s because it's Hollywood. But anyway, they're dead and they're like detectives that help solve other ghosts, like unsolved cases. It's fucking cute as fuck. So go ahead and watch it. It is lighter than a lot of the things I'm going to talk to you about today. And again, trigger warning if you don't like talk about murder or sex, crimes, you shouldn't listen to this episode. The whole thing is going to be bad. There's some really gory parts I'm going to try to tell you before they happen. This is mostly scripted. I actually wrote a script for this, so I'm excited to see how that goes. It's the first time I've ever written a script for a podcast, so I'm very, very excited. But anyway, let's just do this shit. Yeah, I hope I'm going to talk about a lot of victims today. I hope that I can like do this in a respectful way, and I hope that I don't know, this in some way helps to remember that they mattered. They were alive. And their lives were cut short. So, loosely today, the topic of conversation is having to do with online dating and how dangerous it can be, and how hard it can be to put one's self out there, even without even talking about murder and sex crimes. Like, it's just hard. It's just hard to put yourself out there. I'm going to talk much more about that towards the end. But first, I want to tell you guys about what the media has coined the Grindr cannibal. On Christmas Day, 2019, in Flint, Michigan, literally a town over from where I was born in Michigan, the family of 25-year-old hairdresser and college student at the University of Michigan Flint, Kevin Bacon, was preparing to sit down for a holiday breakfast and presumably some gift giving. This was an event that Kevin was supposed to be at, but he would never arrive. And his family, worried, reported him missing to local police. The last person to see him was his roommate, whom he told only the night before that he was going to meet a man that he met on the popular gay meeting app Grindr. It wouldn't be until 3 whole days later that the police would discover his body 20 miles from his home. He was naked and hanging upside down by the ankles from the rafters of the ceiling in the killer's basement. He had been stabbed in the back of the neck, and his body was mutilated. The man he met online, his name is Mark Latunsky. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I don't give a shit. And he has been charged and convicted of first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It is worth mentioning that Latunsky's lawyers initially tried to argue that he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but he would later plead guilty to the charges. This sentence is the harshest sentence allowable under Michigan law. They don't have the death sentence that was taken off the table in the 1960s. Latunsky, who was 50 years old at the time of this crime, was no stranger to local law enforcement in the area. Latunsky had 911 called on him twice in the months leading up to the murder. The first was the previous October by a man who said he was drugged by Latunsky and woke up to find himself chained up in Latunsky's basement. The second from a man that was literally covered in blood who had run to Latunsky's neighbor's house seeking help. The cops were called, but no charges were filed. Latunsky was married twice prior to this and was divorced twice. The first marriage to a woman resulted in children, and in August of that same year, she filed a motion to suspend him from having custodial rights to those children. In said motion, she said that he had been diagnosed years earlier with severe depression, paranoid schizophrenia, and personality disorder symptoms. He frequently failed to take his prescribed medication for this mental illness. He was also put in jail for 4 days for failing to pay child support. His second marriage was to a man that apparently had no idea about any of this mental illness until his ex-wife sued him for said child support. That marriage ended in September of 2019. Basically, 2019 was a really bad year for this man, Latunsky. He had some serious mental problems, and it feels a lot like the system really failed to prevent what happened here. There were so many serious warnings, and these kinds of things only escalate. On December 24th, 2019, Christmas Eve, and this part is really bad, you guys, so if you don't like gory stuff, skip, 20 seconds ahead or something. After killing Kevin Bacon and hanging him up in his basement, Mark Latunsky gutted him. He cut off his testicles. He then ate them and other parts of Kevin's body, and another bright shining light was extinguished before it had even had its time to shine fully. It's hard to believe that in 2019, the warning signs, the huge red flags, weren't detected, and I can't help but think that, as has always been the problem, it's because the system doesn't even flinch when crimes are committed against the disenfranchised, the people living on the margins of society, those whom society often deems to be not our problem. The police, when questioned, said that it was the victims who didn't want to be outed to their communities who should have come forward, citing their alleged internalized homophobia as the cause of this murder instead of the age-old outward homophobia of the law enforcement system. The sources used for that portion of today's episode were an article by Donald Padgett for theadvocate.com and an article by Brenna Ehrlich for rollingstone.com. Another killer that I feel I should mention is the so-called Grindr murderer of the UK, Stephen Port. Stephen Port drugged his victims that he met online, often on Grindr, using a drug called GHB, which stands for gamma hydroxybutyrate, and a similar substance called GBL, gamma butyrotriactone. He would then sexually assault them while they were incapacitated and dying. He killed his first victim on June 17th, 2014. Anthony Walgate, 23, was a fashion design student. After killing him, he left his body on the street outside of his apartment with a bottle of GHB, hoping it would look like an overdose. He admitted to police that he had moved the body of his overdose partner onto the street so that he wouldn't get in trouble. He was put in prison briefly for perverting justice, but he was not charged with Walgate's murder, and so he was eventually freed to continue to kill other people. Slightly more than 2 months later, so he was literally in prison for like a second, on August 25th, he murdered London shop worker Gabriel Cavari. Cavari had been living in Port's apartment for 2 days when he drugged him with a fatal dose of GHB and sexually assaulted him. When friends asked where Cavari was, Port told them he just left and he didn't come back. His body was found by a dog walker on the grounds of Barking Abbey near Port's apartment 3 days later, sitting up against the churchyard wall. GHB in pocket. Not only didn't he care about his victims, but he apparently didn't think he needed to try hard to dispose of their bodies. Clearly, he knew the cops wouldn't bother investigating their deaths as murder. 23-year-old Daniel Whitworth, a chef, was next. Port left him in the same Abbey yard, so near where Cavari's body was left that Whitworth was actually found by the same person walking their dog. As with the other victims, Port had deleted their accounts on Grindr and taken their phones and left the bottle of drugs. This time, however, he constructed a fake suicide note to leave with Whitworth's body. It stated that, overcome with emotion over having killed Gabriel Cavari, he had decided to take his own life. The police still didn't feel they should be investigating any of these deaths as murders. In fact, they labeled the last one unusual and left the case open-ended and cold. They didn't even know that the first of Port's murders was connected to these other two. Because they didn't give a shit about gays doing gay shit with other gays, basically. Not their problem. Less than a year later, Port killed Jack Taylor, a 25-year-old forklift operator. This was his final victim. He was left unoriginally in the same churchyard, same bottle in the pocket, no phone, no Grindr account left, but this time with a tourniquet and medical wipes. Port was eventually caught, and he was charged with all 4 murders, but not soon enough. There should have been 3 more murders. There should never have been 3 more murders. There should have never been a gap of vulnerability so catastrophically large in the system that any of these poor young men should have been killed and dumped and ignored. In fact, there is still an ongoing case against the Metropolitan Police to determine how they failed to properly act in these cases. We can only imagine that there was a couple good cops who whistle blew to make that internal investigation even possible. It doesn't matter if you are in London or Flint, 1970 or 2020. If you are gay or black or poor, the system isn't designed to protect you. We, the minority, have to constantly advocate for ourselves, or no one will. And even then, few will listen. Professor Elizabeth Yardley, professor of criminology and director of the Center for Applied Criminology, that is at the Birmingham City School of Social Sciences, says in her article, "Indeed, I have researched the use of social media by killers for several years now, exploring how homicide perpetrators use Facebook and exploring the meaning of homicide confessions posted on social networking sites. However, focusing upon these elements can sometimes distract us from some of the bigger and more pressing issues that are new and are intricately woven into our social fabric. Exploring contemporary attitudes to gender and sexuality and confronting the stubborn persistence of homophobia in our culture are all crucial to understanding what enabled Port to cause as much harm as he did." That is from a blog article she wrote for the college website. Another thing and one last story I want to talk about as a part of what I researched for this episode is the story of Gavin Guffey. So Gavin, he was the victim of suicide in June of 2022. And he was the victim of internet sex extortion. Hours before his death, he was contacted by someone he thought was a nice young girl around the same age as he was. He was 17. They got to talking, and at some stage, when she asked him to send nude photos of himself to her, and he felt comfortable enough to do so, he did. But she wasn't who she said she was. And she wanted money now. She might not have even been one person. She might have been some indentured, trafficked person in some foreign country being forced to extort Americans for money for their captors to keep them from killing their family, because that's a fucking thing now too. That shit happens too, which is double terrible, obviously. But regardless, Gavin was only 17 and innocent, and he was terrified of being publicly outed. He, in his most vulnerable state, was being told that if he didn't send money, his nude photos would be sent to everyone that he knew, his family everyone at his school, his neighbors. He sent them all of the money he had, $25. And because the fear of shame and embarrassment was so real, because the extorter was so ruthless, and because no amount of begging for his own life made any difference, he got a gun and he shot himself. The whole thing took an hour and 40 minutes from beginning to end. He was a beautiful, smiling, healthy young person, and then he was not. And for what? Brandon Guffey, Gavin's father, is a South Carolina House representative, and he drafted a bill called H3583, nicknamed Gavin's Law, which, according to the South Carolina Department of Education website, is legislation that makes sexual extortion, the act of blackmailing someone using sexual explicit images or videos, a felony offense and an aggravated felony if the victim is a minor, a vulnerable adult, or if the victim suffers bodily injury or death directly related to the crime. It was signed into law by Governor McMaster's, thankfully and surprisingly, considering the ban on gender-affirming care just passed on the day that I am recording this in the Senate here in South Carolina. So there will be no gender-affirming care for people under, I think, 21 or something in this state because of the bill that passed today. But that's another story. We'll talk about that in another episode. Gavin's Law is important, if for no other reason than to bring attention to this terribly dangerous thing that can happen to people on the internet. Most of the perpetrators of this kind of sextortion, however, operate, as I said earlier, outside of the United States. They don't have to see their victims in person. They probably will never answer for their crimes. The same thing is happening all over the U.S. to other young people. Teenage boys who are already so filled with shame for other reasons are the number one target of sex extortion. And sources I use for this section are an article by Faith Karimi from CNN.com and an article by Caitlin Shelton for NewsNation.com. So, some really serious stuff, you guys. I don't know, I guess I'm in some kind of mood lately. You know, it was only a matter of time before I did some true crime, because that's a passion of mine. I don't know why I don't have a true crime podcast, because that's basically all I listen to. I decided to have a sex podcast, but you know, sex is so many things. I was listening to Red Handed podcast. They were talking about the Children of God cult, and they oftentimes would say that sex is love, love is sex, and of course they were like forcing children and women to have sex with a whole bunch of adult men, and crazy shit was happening. And so like that was all terrible, obviously. But if you're not in that fucking cult, sex can be love. Love can be sex. They can be one and the same, but not always. And sex can be a weapon. It can be dangerous. It could be a lot of things. It should always be consensual. And if it's not love. And it should never be used to take away someone's power. It should never be used to threaten anyone. It should only be in love. And so, yeah, that's kind of partially what has, I guess, motivated me. I can't believe that this actually brought me to tears when I was researching this. Was Gavin Guffey was, it took an hour and 40 minutes for him to go from being just a normal kid to deciding he wanted to end his life. I mean, it's insane. It's insane how vulnerable certain people are in this world. It's insane how delicate life is. This was not even scripted, this part. I just literally, I can't just ignore that part. It's insane. I remember hearing about it, and I thought someone said it was like a couple days from beginning to end. But when I researched it, I found out it was an hour and 40 minutes. And I was just like, I've taught yoga classes longer than that. And then you see pictures of this boy. He was just he just had so much ahead of him. It's so terrible. Oh, I'll continue. I actually sought out to just write an episode that I had done slightly more research for. I wanted to sound smart, and I had found the Grindr Cannibal article, and I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it needed to be talked about. But as I mentioned, as most true crime heads know, the more you read into a true crime case, the more any sensitive human will start to connect with the victims. The more you can imagine the poor soul that was tortured and killed while trying to be who they are to the best of their abilities at that time. People just trying to put themselves out there in a world that is already scary enough without also incorporating the fear of being murdered and forgotten. I got this write-in from a fan. I don't know if this person's into men or women or what, but I couldn't help but think how, regardless of orientation, putting yourself quote unquote out there can be terrifying. And this is a lighter write-in. It's not anything to do with murder or death. But anyway, this is a write-in. It says, Drew, I love your pod, and I think it's so cool that you started reading Reddits on the air. I figured you could help me with a little problem I'm having. I am a fairly confident guy, and I like myself and my body and everything, but I have such a hard time asking people out. I think it's a fear of being rejected, but I don't know. I basically just wait until someone is super into me and gives me all of the signals that they like me, and then we're just dating. I don't initiate the what are we conversation ever. I have had a couple partners that found this to be very frustrating. I am also not great about showing emotion. What can I do? Is this fear I have normal? Walker, what does it say? Walker Sexy Stranger. That's a good one. It's a good name. Write in every time you write in, make up a fun name for yourself. I like that. Walker Sexy Stranger. It's normal. It's normal to have whatever emotions you're having. And you're not alone. If you've been hurt before, putting yourself out there can almost seem insane. It's like, and I actually wrote this part. So if it seems like I'm reading a poem, it's because I wrote it. It's like the air puffer thing at the eye doctor. How insane it seems to sit there and watch something that will inevitably be uncomfortable or potentially traumatizing slowly draw nearer and nearer to you, and then poof, right in the fucking eyeball. I guess, though, that however unpleasant it is to visit your optometrist, it is in your best interest to have your eyes tested. We have to do tough things in this life, whether we are on board or not. If we don't put ourselves on the slab as a human sacrifice, something will happen that slaps us up there eventually anyway. So that was something I wrote actually before I read Walker's write-in. Just about putting yourself out there. I mean, I think honestly, like, I think we're afraid of a lot of things. I think it's a defense mechanism to be afraid. But I don't think fear has to be like this thing where you sense it and you go, whoa, I'm going to go the other way. Bye. I think fear is like a friend holding your hand. Like, let yourself be afraid, but let yourself be there. Let yourself go there. Um, don't jump into the unknowing abyss, blindly. Walk slowly, mindfully into situations that you are unsure of, and just allow yourself to be guided by your brain and your heart, and just let yourself be just a little bit afraid. And then you'll start to say, oh, actually, this is okay. I can be less afraid now. But I don't think you're going to get rid of the fear. And I don't think that you're the only person that feels a fear of rejection. Um, in May, I have an episode coming out. I've already mentioned this woman. Her name is Susan Bratton. She's amazing. She told me, and you'll hear the interview, she tells me that you just have to make people offers. You want something, you need something for your sex life or your relationships or whatever. You just have to make people offers. And a lot of people are going to say no to your offers, and some people will say yes. And everybody deals with rejection. So, like, just put yourself out there. And eventually someone's going to say yes. Someone that you really like is going to really like you too, and it's going to work itself out, and then that'll run its course as far as that can go. I do want to say though that it does seem like, and I don't think Walker Sexy Stranger is a queer person, but maybe you are. It doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter. We all have to deal with these things, but as a queer person, I definitely feel it's some added difficulty, and maybe I'm just making it harder for myself, but I don't know, because I think when you're someone who's on the outskirts of society, it's just harder. I mean, like, I'm a non-binary person, and I feel some days very womanly, and some days I feel a little bit more manly. I never feel very manly, but and I think people see me as both genders. I've talked about this probably a million times, but I mean, I literally, within a normal day, I get called ma'am at least once, and not just from behind. I mean, I literally will have someone go, ma'am, oh, sir, sorry. And you're just like, we've been sitting here talking to each other, and you mistook me for a woman, and then instantly knew you were wrong. So it's almost like there's two different things I'm showing to people. It's almost like they're not sure. I don't know if they're not sure what my gender is, but I really haven't changed much in those scenarios. Like, I might be wearing like all men's clothing, and I might have my hair is long, but I might have it like pulled up in like a really messy bun, which is a look that both men and women have. I might have even not shaven for 4 days. Like, I haven't done anything. I don't have any nail polish on. I'm not wearing like earrings or a necklace. Like, I'm literally doing nothing to be more womanly. And a person will come up to me and mistake me in an instant for a woman, and then think that I'm, oh, sorry, sir, and be very embarrassed by their mistake. And I'm almost like, I don't even know that I should say it's a mistake to think I'm a woman. I mean, I know I have a penis, but I just feel like I'm just a person. I really just feel like a person, and I love it when people just treat people like people, regardless of their gender. It just makes so much more sense to me. But it makes dating hard. There are gay guys that probably think I'm too feminine. There are quote unquote straight guys that are attracted to me but will never act on it. There's guys that I have serious feelings for that will probably never have the balls to want to date me. And not sorry to make this whole fucking episode about myself, but I was thinking about this week too, because I had previously stated, I don't know to whom or where, but I remember at some point in the last fucking 10 years saying something like, I'm a lot to handle. I'm a lot to love. Whoever loves me is going to have to be able to handle that. And then today, or no, it wasn't today. It was, I think, yesterday. I was walking the dogs. I always have great ideas walking the dogs, or in the shower. I said, no, I'm fucking not. I'm not a lot to handle. I'm not a lot to love. I am so fucking easy to love. And I have a ton of fucking people that love me for, all different kinds of love, of course. I have no shortage of love from others. And I love other people. Not everybody, but a lot of other people, right? And it is so easy for them to love me. I don't have to ask them to jump through any hoops. They just do. And I'm not a lot to handle. I'm a fucking joy to be around. And I know that sounds like, I'm tooting my own horn, but I don't always understand that. But there's so many people who enjoy my company, and it's okay to know that, because the alternative is to pretend that you are a lot to handle, and you are, you're really asking a lot for someone to accept you. And it's like, no, I'm fucking not. I accept so many people on their terms. Oh, this is who you are? Cool, I accept that. If a person doesn't have it in their ability to accept me, then they just don't get me. And it's not my problem at all. It's maybe not even their problem. They just don't get to be my friend. They don't get to have me in their life. If you can't love me or handle me, then you shouldn't. It's not even that you can't handle or love anything. It just is that we're not aligned. We'll go our separate ways. It's fine. And that's the thing about putting yourself out there. If you say, hey, I'm kind of into you. Are you into me? And they say, oh, sorry, man, totally not. You're like, okay, cool. Sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel weird. I just wanted to let you know. But, and it's totally fine to be like, I don't feel like that about you, but like, I really like you as a person. And I do honestly really want to like hang out. And then it's like, cool. Well, now I have a friend, Now I can literally have another great fucking awesome friend, which is, a lot of people think, much more valuable in this life than to have a lot of lovers. So putting yourself out there can be hard, but it's something I think we have to do. I don't think we have a choice. I just think like you have to live your life. You have to change. You have to continue moving forward. And if you're going to make a fucking huge traumatic deal about something, then it's just going to be hugely traumatic. At some point you have to say, nope, I've accepted that this is necessary, and I'm not going to freak out about it because it's not benefiting me to do that. I'm going to just see this for what it is. It's a molehill, not a mountain, and I'm going to step over it. That being said, and why the fuck did I start this whole episode talking about murder? I don't know. Maybe I haven't fully formed my ideas with this episode, but I just think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of tools that one can have in their toolbox. I think you've got, like I said, the fear, which I think can be useful. Nervousness, anxiety, those things can all be useful. your intuition, which is sometimes hard to hear because I'm like cracking my knuckles as I talk about this. I was also counting my fingers. That's how I got into cracking my knuckles. Intuition's hard because you might think you're listening to your internal voice, your intuition, but it could be someone else's voice, that from your past. I don't think your intuition's ever going to tell you anything negative about you. It's never going to tell you that you're not capable of something. Your intuition's always going to be like desire driven, I think. Fear might be like your spirit guides, in maybe not spirit guides, but it's like your ancestors, maybe like your people from your past who want to keep you safe. And you know how families do that shit. They want to keep you safe. They tell you shit that's like, oh, possibly like, makes you feel a little bit bad about yourself. But at least you're not dead. Right? That's how families operate. They don't understand they're hurting you more by saying mean things to you about yourself because they're supposed to love you and accept you unconditionally. And now they're saying mean things to you. So it's like very traumatizing also, right? But even in their afterlife, your ancestors are saying things like, you can't do that. You're too fat. It's like, oh shit. I think all these things can be useful. You got to have all of them in your toolkit. And I think you need to listen to your heart and your head equally. I think it's really important. Not one without the other. And if you have a bad feeling about someone or something, like a really bad feeling, like you just can't really put your finger on it, that in my head is like, turn around, walk the other way. Don't fucking apologize. You can apologize later if you're mistaken. But if something is like really, you run into someone and they are just like glassy black eyes and they just seem evil as fuck. Nope, turn around, walk the other way. You can explain later from a distance. I don't think any victim should be, it's not their fault they were victimized, but I do think there are things that we can do moving forward in our lives to prevent certain kinds of things from possibly happening. And we can just be safer, maybe. We can just be more mindful and just more honest with ourselves and, about situations. I don't know. I don't know if we can prevent bad things from ever happening fully, but we can reduce the risk of really bad things happening, let's say. And to end our episode, I also looked up an article by Sherry Gordon entitled Are Dating Apps Safe? And that's on verywellmind.com. And there's a little blurb here I'm going to read, but then I'm going to kind of paraphrase from the website some of the other stuff I saw, which now reminds me that I have to get my laptop for that. 1 second. This article just has a lot of really good information regarding, like, I guess, cybersecurity for you if you're online dating. I was telling my therapist that I kind of just like don't like using the hookup apps. I just feel like I'm not really interested in a lot of the guys that are on them and around here, and I just don't like so much about it. And he was like, weren't you just telling me that you're like that you have like limited opportunities to meet people? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, it seems like you're maybe limiting yourself to have, additional opportunities if you're not letting yourself online date. So I was like, well, that's fucking true. But some of these guys are absolutely terrible. Okay, so it says here from the Are Dating Apps Safe article. For instance, interacting with strangers online can put you at risk for identity theft, online harassment, stalking, digital dating abuse, catfishing, and other scams. If you do decide to meet up in real life with someone you met on a dating app, you need to ensure your physical safety as well. So there's all these other things that you should consider, I guess, if you want to be less susceptible to bad shit happening. Now, mind ye, I used to live in New York. I used to fuck and get fucked by a bunch of fucking randos. Some of which I would just meet on the subway. I had my slutty phase. Nothing too terrible ever happened to me. But I just want people to have options, okay? On our dating app Safe site, there's just a lot of really cool stuff. To make navigating the online dating scene a little easier and safer, we have compiled a list of important facts about online dating. At a glance, there's some stuff I didn't realize in here. Like, if you're going to online date, consider whatever app it is getting a free trial first. Familiarize yourself with the safety features of the app. Make sure you know how to block and report people who behave inappropriately. Decide how visible you want your profile to be. Skip apps that allow messaging before matching. Set up geographic location features. That's pretty cool, actually. Don't link your profile to your social accounts. That is so crazy because a lot of these sex apps and dating apps will let you link other social media, and I'm just like, and I see it all the time. I see Instagrams on people's Grinders and Scruffs, and I'm just like, wow. Oh, by the way, I didn't say this before. I don't want to get sued by Grindr. The Grindr cannibal guy, he met that guy in Grindr. Okay. The Grindr killer in England, he used Grindr to meet a lot of his victims, but not all of them. They met online somehow. So I don't know how many of the 4 victims met him on Grindr, but they all were people that he found online. Okay, so the rest of the stuff on the site, they've got facts about online dating apps. Online dating has lost a lot of its stigmas. It's become more popular and more acceptable, kind of like getting in someone else's car, Uber. People can be dishonest when using apps. They can hide behind the app, there's different reasons why people are using dating apps. Some are finding sexual partners, some are building friendships, some are finding romantic partners. They want to travel and have dates in different places. Some are looking for self-improvement and self-validation. Some are just looking for entertainment and curiosity, fulfilling curiosities. Online relationships may last longer. I'm not going to read that because I don't care. Online dating can be dehumanizing. Choose the safest dating app for you. Review the safety features. I already read that somewhere else. There's all this really good stuff on this article, guys. It's pretty lengthy. And, you could just Google how to be safe while dating. And then, how do I move from online to meeting in person safely? There's ways to do these things, I would say always meet someone you've never met before in a well-lit public place, where there's lots of other people around. I think that's the best way to do it. I probably wouldn't bring somebody back to my apartment anymore these days, now that I'm upwards of 40 or whatever. Not quite, almost. I wouldn't do that. I don't really want a lot of people to know where I live unless I really trust them. Of course, if I lived in a big packed, apartment building again, I probably wouldn't give a shit because, all the apartments look the same. And it's like, a hungry lion with a bunch of zebras. They all look the same. It's like, which one do I eat? And the chances of you surviving if you're a zebra is better if you're with a bunch of other zebras, right? So I feel like that in an apartment. But I'm using some very loose analogies in this episode. I just want to talk a little bit more about how being disenfranchised or being marginalized or being in a more niche social group makes you more vulnerable to being at risk. So I think there's all these things in our society that are untouchable. They're not meant to be talked about or delved into too deeply. And at different points of human history, different things like being gay was more or less acceptable at different times throughout history, depending on where you were in the world. Same with being a woman. Although being a woman is not a minority thing, it's literally the majority. But you know how that shit goes. I think it's like 54% of the world is female or something. You know, a little bit more female than male. And women live longer and all that shit too, right? But and this is how it is with sex work, like when something is, so sex work in most of the United States, almost all of the United States, is illegal. And they make it illegal because they say that they're trying to protect sex workers. But the people that end up getting in trouble and put in, through the system are the sex workers. So it's not helping them by penalizing them for their work. Also, it's going to happen regardless. It's the same as abortion. It's going to happen regardless of whether or not it's legal. So, because there's a need for it in society. And it's, they call sex work like the oldest, what do they say? The oldest vocation known to man. It's like every since the dawn of man, there was like people like using sex as currency, right? And so there's a need for it. It's as human as having fingers. I don't know. I was gonna say as human as apple pie, but that's not. That's a really bad parallel. When it's illegal, it becomes harder to regulate. It becomes harder to protect sex workers from violence and bad things that can happen to them. It makes it so they're not able to have the same. They can't be out in the light. They can't be visible to society. They have to be hiding, and that makes them vulnerable. When they're hiding in the shadows, bad things lurk in the shadows. So by making sex work illegal, it's actually it's not dissuading anyone from becoming a sex worker or staying a sex worker. It's just making it more dangerous to be a sex worker. And that's how it is with sex. Sex in general being super taboo because so many people are so anti-sex sexuality, anti-alternative sexuality, anti-this, anti-that. It makes being anything other than what's quote-unquote acceptable more dangerous. Oh, so many serial killers, they prey on people who they know they can get away with preying on. They know that no one's going to give a shit if they kill this gay guy. I'm a gay guy, killed this gay guy, left his body, and I can just tell the cops, oh, we were just fucking, and he took some drugs. I think he took too many drugs. And then the cops are like, oh God, we don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Blech. It's like that thing where Jeffrey Dahmer killed that young, I want to say he was Filipino man. And he didn't die. The man escaped and he got out onto the street. And then some people called the cops, and the cops came, and Jeffrey Dahmer was like, no, it's fine. He's my lover. We just had a little fight, but he's fine. He's drunk. I'm going to take him upstairs. We'll take care of him. And the cop said, okay, fine, get him off the street. He's annoying, basically. Like, get him out of here. And then you could hear the cops saying on their radio that, oh man, I touched that guy. Now I'm going to have to go like sanitize my hands because he's a faggot. He didn't say the word faggot, but that's essentially what he meant. And then Dahmer took him up to his apartment and murdered him. He finished the job. The cops were right there. Had he not been gay, they would have saved him. Had so-and-so not been black, they would have been on every milk carton. Some little black girl got kidnapped and murdered. They would have found her. Some indigenous man's body left out in the cold. They would have investigated that as a murder and not just, he's drunk because he's indigenous and he walked out into the snow without any shoes or a coat on. Miles away from civilization without any shoes or a coat. And they label it an accidental death. Nobody bothers to investigate because he's indigenous. I want to say one last thing because it's been an hour. There's a really good movie called, let me Google it because I don't want to be wrong. I believe it's called Origins or Origin. Let me just Google this really fast. You guys love it when I do this. Origin movie. Yeah. So Origin movie is, I can't remember if it's like based on a true story or if it's just, I don't know. It says that 2023 American biographical drama film. Okay, cool. So in this movie, there's like this woman, she's African American, she's a scholar, and she's a writer. She has this idea that society's problems aren't exactly about race. Like, obviously in our country, there's an issue with race. Other places in the world there are too. But she's like, in this country there's issues with race. But during the Holocaust, there was issues with religion. But the Jews and the Germans were all white for the most part. But their problem wasn't with anything like that. It wasn't with race because they were all white. And you look at, the Irish and the British, that whole history, they're all white. How can it be about race? They're all white. You go to India and you look at the caste system that they have there. They're all brown people. They're all Indian people. It's not an issue of race there either. The problem in society has to do with caste. It has to do with the fact that in society we decide that these people are acceptable. Sorry, I just hit my computer. I was like flailing my hands around and trying to talk. These people are acceptable. These people are not acceptable. And in India, they actually call them untouchables. Like they're so low beneath other humans that they can't be looked at, they can't be talked about, they can't be touched. They're just untouchables. And they are subhuman in that system. They're at the bottom of the barrel. They can't be given certain kinds of jobs. They're basically serfs their whole lives. And this still exists in India today. And they don't call them untouchables now. They have another name, and I can't remember. It starts with a D. I can't remember it. But anyway, it's just this thing that we do. We think that some people are better than other people, and they're not. They're just people. We think that rich people are like gods and poor people are just all the bad things. Evil, dumb, fat, stupid, like just all these bad things. We're like, oh, those are poor people. They smell bad. They're unhygienic, blah, 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 blah. Poor people. And rich people are wonderful, and we idolize them. But one group just has more money. That's the only difference, is that they have money. And go back 100 years, this family that has money today might not have even had any money 100 years ago. Like, it's just such a thing that you can, within one lifetime, you can go from rags to riches. That's the American way, right? If you can change that drastically in one lifetime, is it really even a thing at all? I mean, just like, it's all so stupid. It's all made up. It's all in our head. It's just crazy. It's crazy. I could go on forever trying to solve the world's problems in one episode of my podcast that's supposed to be just about blowjobs. Anyway, guys, that's that. I hope this wasn't too rough. I'm not planning on editing at all because I need to publish right now. It's 11 o'clock. One more hour left on the Thursday for me to make the recording day as I intended. But please, guys, let me know what you thought about this. It was partially scripted. It's hard to write an hour's worth of dialogue, and it's also really hard to read dialogue that you've written and make it sound like you're saying it in the moment. There's some skill involved here. I'm gonna have to work on it. But anyway, guys, thank you so much, and thanks for being here with me. Thanks for being mindful with me. Thanks for being serious a little bit this week, and I hope you guys are doing okay. I do. And I hope you guys rate, review, subscribe, support us in the work we do, and I hope you guys are filling your holes with whatever makes you happy, or just whatever gets you by, straight up. One last thing. These terrible tornadoes happened and I think in Kansas and whatever in the last week or so. Apparently there weren't that many deaths, thank God, but there was a meme going around the internet of like just a random dildo in the middle of like a house that's been ripped apart, and it said something like, I never even imagined how many flying dildos there were in this tornado. Oh, whatever gets you by, sweetie. Bye-bye.